Hey everyone. So welcome back to the backend video. And in the last one, actually, we created our auth controller. And inside auth controller, we created our register endpoint, send OTP, verify OTP, and login. Okay. Now, the purpose of this particular video is to create all the APIs that are needed in order for our application to work. And also we are going to define lots of socket events and listeners. Okay, so socket event emitters and listeners, we are going to create that inside this particular video. First of all, we need to start by making some models. So I'm just going to navigate to this models folder. Okay, and let me also tell you that if you want to ask any question, you can ask that because it's a live stream. Okay. And if you are watching the pre-recorded version, then you can just post your doubts in the comment section. I'll be replying to them. Okay. So the first thing is here we need to go inside this models folder, and there will be three kinds of models inside our project. Okay. So the first one is user. We obviously need users because we are going to log into our application. Okay, we'll be updating our profile and lots of things which are related to users. So we need this user.js file. Now, the next thing is we are going to store lots of conversations. Now, whenever two users are going to interact with each other through chat, we are going to call that conversation. So here I'm just going to create a new model for that. So let's call it conversation.js. Okay. Now, let's think about the conversation. What happens inside a conversation? There are two participants. Okay, we are talking about our application. Okay, so here we are going to have two participants. So the first thing that comes to my mind when I am talking about the conversation is the participants. Okay, so let me write that over here as a comment. Participants. We're going to basically have a field for storing participants. Then the next thing is whenever there is a conversation, there are messages. So here we're going to have a messages array. Okay. Now, in order to create a model, first of all, we need a schema. Okay. Now, to create a schema, we're going to make use of this Mongoose library. Okay. And let me actually tell you that over here, yeah, node modules are installed, but you can just open up your terminal. Okay. So I'm just going to pull up my terminal and let me make sure that I have all the required dependencies. So I'm just going to run npmi inside my uh, project directory. Okay. Then let's again close this terminal. Okay. I'm just going to collapse it. Now here I'm going to write const mongoose equals require. Okay. And here I'm going to require this package called mongoose. Okay. Now, after we have mongoose, we are going to create the schema. In order to create the schema, first of all, let's write schema equals mongoose dot schema. Okay. Now we can call this schema class. Okay. And here I'm just going to write new schema. And inside this, we need to pass the configuration for our schema. Let me actually write this equal to conversation schema because we are going to next, reference this schema in order to convert it into a model. So here we have new schema equals conversation schema. So here we are going to have two things. First is participants. Now this participants is not going to be a single person. It's going to be, multiple persons. That is why it's going to be an array. Okay. Then inside the array, we need to define the structure of each participant. Now each participant is going to have, the type. So the type will be schema dot types dot object ID. So what I mean is here we are going to store the object ID of each user. So when we create a user inside our MongoDB database, we are going to basically get an underscore ID property, which is object ID in Mongoose, okay, in MongoDB actually. So we are going to store that ID over here inside the participants array. We're going to have object, and that object is going to basically have, you know, that ID. So we are just defining the type over here, and let's also use this ref property so that we can populate this particular field. Okay, so this ref is going to be actually the name of a model. Here you can see the name of user model. If we just come to user model and see over here, when we are creating model inside this user, we are basically calling it user. Okay, so we are just passing ref equals user. This means this particular ID belongs to a given user inside our database. Okay, so this is the participants structure, how we are going to store the list of participants. Next up is we want to also store list of all the messages in a conversation. Okay. So again, this is going to be an array and each message is going to have a defined type. Okay. Now, over here, again, I'm just going to store the message ID. Okay. So here, let's write schema dot types dot object ID. Now, again, this is going to be an object ID and the reference this time will be message. Now, you might be wondering, we already had user, so I referenced user over here, but we don't have message, so why I'm writing it over here? Yes, that's true. We don't have, we haven't created this message yet, but we are going to do it after this one. Okay. So we are going to create a model with the name of message, and I'm just referring to that message document over here using this ID property. Okay. Then let's create the model. So here I'm just going to write const conversation equals, and in order to create a model we just need to again make use of the mongoose library. So let's write new mongoose dot model. Okay. Now inside this we need to pass two things. First of all, the name of the model, so that is conversation, and the second thing is conversation schema. Okay. So let's write conversation schema. Now after we have created this conversation model, we also need to export it from this file so that we can use it in other files. So let's write module dot exports equals conversation. Okay. So this is how we have created our conversation model. But let me tell you that this is incomplete without the message model. Okay. Because we are using that over here. Let me check if there are any questions in the comment section. Okay. So yeah, I'm actually ending this app today. Okay. About the features, we are going to complete the one-to-one chat uh, today, which is 7th October. Okay. And the group chat features, they will be available on the next day. Okay. So let's now continue with our backend code. Here, after creating our conversation schema, next thing I'm going to create is message model. So let's write message.js. Okay. Now the pattern will be same, only the fields are going to differ, and I'm also going to basically tell you about the requirements of message. That means what kind of a structure do we need in order to display all the messages. Okay. So here we are going to create a general format for the message. First of all, let's think about it. So inside message, we need the author. Okay. That means the person who has written the message. So that was this author is going to point to that user. Okay. Then the next thing we need is the content. Now here content refers to the text. Okay. So in simple text message, the content is going to be just text. It can also contain a link. But in case of media message, in case of document, it this will be caption actually. Okay. Because you must have seen whenever we are sending a media message, let's say an image, video, okay, or even a document, we want to basically write some text along with it. So this content is going to contain the text. Then the next thing we need over here is media. Okay. We'll talk about the structure of media also, but for now, we just know that we need media. Okay. Then the next thing is when we send a audio message, we are going to store that audio message somewhere, and inside our database, we are just going to store the URL. Okay. Similarly, when we send a document message, which means a file or let's say PPT, PDF, any kind of file, we are going to call it document message. So for that as well, we are going to store the document. But this time it's not just going to be URL, because in document message I also want to show the document size and the name of the document. So we are going to basically create an object in this place, okay, for the document. Then the next thing is we are also want to share Giphy inside our application. So in case of Giphy, we are just going to store the URL, okay. Then I also want to store the date on which the message was created. Date is actually going to be timestamp. It's also going to contain the time. So don't confuse it with just the date property. Okay. Then the last and most important thing is type, because we can have different types of messages. Let me also write the types that we are going to have. The first one is media. Okay. And then the second one is text. We're also going to have document message. Then we'll also have audio and Giphy message. So these are the different kind of messages that we are going to implement. Okay. Now don't worry about that group messages, because when we implement one-to-one messages, group messages is just we have to create a group, that is a room, and whenever we are creating or broadcasting a message, okay, we just have to do it inside the room. So there is only very slight difference in between the one-to-one chat and group chat. So first of all, please focus on creating the one-to-one chat. If you understand this one clearly, then the group chat is going to be very easy for you. Okay. About the encryption, yes, we are going to do that. Okay. First of all, we need to cover the basic features of our application. Okay, which means sending the messages. Okay, different types of messages, displaying it on our UI. So let's cover that right now. Now, after discussing this blueprint of the message schema, I want to write it in the code format. So let's just create Mongoose schema for this. So we have to write Mongoose equals require. Here I'm just going to import the package inside this file, Mongoose. Now, using Mongoose, let's get the schema class. So here I'm going to write const schema equals, and this will be equal to mongoose dot schema. Okay. Now, here we need to create our message schema. So let me write message schema equals, and here we need to instantiate this schema class. So I'm going to write new schema, and inside this we are going to pass the configuration. Okay. So the first thing I want to pass over here is the author property. Now, author is going to be an ID of the user, as I have already told you. So let me just again check if there are any more messages. Yeah, so group chat is available inside this application, and also we are going to add encryption inside our messages. Okay, passwords are already encrypted. We are also going to add encryption inside messages. Okay, so over here, let's talk about the author property. So the type is going to be the Mongoose object ID. So here I'm just going to write schema dot types dot object ID. Okay. Here let's also add the reference so that we can populate this field later on. So here the reference will be user. Okay. Then the next property is the content. Now content is just a simple string. Okay. You can add, you know, like limitations on it, like the minimum length, maximum length, or like trimming it from the start and end for removing the extra white space, all that kind of property. But I'm just going to write over here is type string. Let's also set trim row. Okay, don't please make sure that the spelling is correct. Otherwise, this schema is not going to be valid, and you will get into an error. Okay. So here I'm actually not setting the minimum length or maximum length, but you can do that. Okay. Then let's talk about the media. Now, inside media, actually, it's not going to be just one. There will be multiple. So first of all, we need an array. Now inside array, we need to define the general structure for each media. So each media is going to first of all have a type. Now this type property is itself going to be an string because it can have two values, and those two values will be defined inside this enum property. So the first type is image. Media can be either image or video. We are only going to allow these two media inside our application. Okay. Then after the type, we also need the URL property because obviously this is what we are going to store inside our database so that we can show that inside on our UI. Okay. So let's write type string, and after our media property, next thing we need is the audio URL. So this is very simple property. Audio URL, it's just going to be a simple string. So let's write the type over here, and the type will be string. Again, let me repeat that you have to write string in this particular way. Okay. So because these are the inbuilt values, okay, I am not writing it or I am not actually making these from my own mind. So this is defined inside the Mongoose. Okay, you have to follow this same approach. You can change these fields, like instead of calling it audio URL, you can call it something else. But this structure, it has to remain the same. Okay. Uh, Next, we need to define the Giphy URL. So let me just duplicate this one. And instead of audio, I'm just going to write Giphy in this place. Okay. And after that, I also want to define the type of messages. Now again, type is going to be a string. So let's write type string. And the possible values for this type will be either it can be a media message or it can be text, document, okay, document. It can be Giphy or audio. Okay, so these are the five different kinds of messages. And now our schema is also going to follow this same approach. Okay, it's not going to allow any other kind of message. But there is one more property left over here, which is the document. And as I told you previously, that inside document message, we want to show the size of the file and also the name of the file, okay, along with the file's URL, obviously. So for that, I'm going to actually create a separate schema, and then we can just reference that schema inside this one. So this concept may be new to you because we are now going to, embed schema inside each other. So here, let me create document schema, and this is again going to be similar. We just need to write new and then the class name is schema. Let's create a new schema. So inside this one, I just want three fields. I already told you. First of all, we need a URL, and the URL style will be string. Then we need the name of the file. Again, the type will be string. And the third is file size. So for the size of file, we are actually going to store a number, and this number will be in megabytes. Okay. So here we have our document schema, and now in order to define the document field inside our messages, we can just simply write, let's say I want to define it over here. Okay. Actually, I made a mistake. So let me just correct that. Yeah, right. Now it's correct. And I can write over here document field. This is going to follow the document schema. Okay, so this is how we basically embed one schema inside each other. Okay, in this MongoDB. Okay, the same approach can be followed in other document-based databases. Okay, so if you know just one database pretty well, then the others will be also very easy for you. Okay, now after creating this messages schema, the next step is to create a model out of it and export it from this file. So let's do that. First of all, we are going to write message, okay, and this will be equal to new mongoose.model. Okay, now inside this we need to pass two things again. First of all, the name of schema, okay, that we are actually creating, sorry, the name of model, not the schema. Then we need to pass a reference to the schema. After that, we are going to get the message, which is the model. Okay, and I'm going to export this model from this file. So let's write module.exports equals message. Okay, so now one thing is clear, that we have created our message model, and we are referencing that over here inside the conversation schema. Okay, so now our models are ready. Let's also make sure that the user model is correct. So what we have created in the last one, let's actually go through it one more time. Before that, I'm again going to check if there are any more questions. Okay, so there are no not additional questions. So I'm just going to continue with our code base. So inside our user schema, let's check what fields do we have. So first of all, we have this name field. Okay, it's going to be used to store the name of the person. Okay, name of the user actually. Then we have the email field. Okay, now this email field, inside this actually the validation is wrong. It is required, yes, but the message should be email is required. Okay, so I've just corrected that. And the validator that we are using, it's a third party library. Okay, and we're just checking if it's a valid email. And if it is a valid email, then we just, let the document to basically create a new record. Otherwise, we're going to throw this error that email and then the given email is invalid. Okay, this error will be thrown in that case. And then we also have this unique property set to true. This means that the emails are unique. Okay, no two users can have the same email. Okay, and after this, we have defined our password property. Type is set to string, password changed at. This is going to be used to basically check if the user has recently changed their password or not. So type is date. Okay. It's going to actually store a timestamp. Then we have the verified property, which means whether the user has verified their email or not. Okay. It's a verified account or not. So we are just going to store the true or false value over here. By default, it's going to be false. Okay. Then here we need to also basically add few more properties. First of all, let's see. We have the OTP. In order to store the OTP expiry time, because we are going to, set an expiry time each time we generate an OTP. So it will be 10 minutes from the timestamp of generation. Okay. Then we have the status of each user, which means whether the user is currently online or offline. By default, users will be offline when they are created. Let's also add this property socket ID because we are going to store the socket ID of each user when they connect to our socket IO server. Okay. Then there is also one more property that I want to add over here, and that is called the avatar property. Now this avatar property is going to hold the URL of user's image. Okay. So here I'm just going to write avatar and its type is going to be a string. So let's write type a string. Okay. And also inside our UI, since we have the, a form where the user can update other information like their bio, their country, and their job title. So I'm also going to add those fields over here. So let's write after the name, job title. Now this job title is again going to be of type string. So here I'm just going to write type string. Then after the job title, we have the user's bio. So let me just write bio in place of job after duplicating it. Okay. Then the last thing is we also need to store the user's country. Okay. So here I'm just going to write country, and this country field is going to be of type string again. Inside of bio, I want to basically mark trim as true so that the additional white space from the start and ending that will be trimmed. Okay, so this is our user schema. Then after this, we have also enabled timestamps. This means inside the database, we'll also see the timestamp, two timestamps actually created at and updated at. Created at is going to tell us where when this particular document or the record for the user was created, and each time we update some field, okay, this updated at timestamp will be changed. Okay, you will see that when we have some users inside our database. Now here we have created our pre-save hook. Okay, there are actually two pre-save hooks. I can merge them inside just one, and that will be better. Otherwise this is going to give us some unexpected result, because what is going to happen, let's say when we are updating the OTP and password at the same time in some case. Okay, then after this function is run, okay, the logic inside this is run, it's going to without hashing the password, it will save the password. So at the time either the password or the OTP, one of those things will be hashed, the other will remain unencrypted. So I want to merge both of these together. You can also leave it for now and see when we integrate it into our client side, then you will see what I'm telling you. Okay, that means when you hash the OTP, the uh, password will remain unencrypted and vice versa. So what I'm going to do right now, let's just focus on this one. This is our pre-save hook. Here we are checking if the OTP is modified or not. If it is not modified, then we just get to the next middleware. So what I'm going to do right now, let's just remove this not sign from here and also from here. So this means when the OTP is actually modified. So in that case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to execute some logic over here. So let me write the logic, which is these two lines. First of all, has it, okay, and here I'm just going to hash the OTP, and then I can just console log whatever I want to, pass into inside the console. Then here I'm just going to get this condition if, okay, let me paste that over here after the first if condition. And then I'll just remove this exclamation mark. Okay, let me remove it from here. And then over here, I'm just going to copy these two lines. Okay, paste it over here inside this body of if. Okay, then I can just safely remove this another pre-save hook. So this is some code modification. We have just done this so that we don't get any unexpected result later on. Now here we have defined two methods. One is for checking if the OTP is correct, and the second is for checking if the password is correct. And we are doing this because our OTP and password, they are going to be hashed. Okay, and so that's why we are not going to be able to compare them directly. So we need to make use of this bcrypt package in order to compare and check if they are true or not. Okay, that means the OTP or the password which is stored inside our database, we are going to compare them with the ones that is given by the user, okay, inside the form. So these are the two methods. Actually, we are also going to create another method over here, and that will be change the password after. I'm going to actually tell you when we use it inside our auth controller. So for now, this user model is correct. Okay. I just want to leave a comment over here for to do. So I'm just going to write to do, and here we are going to later on create our changed password after. Okay, this is going to be a method which is going to tell us that when the user is logging in or basically trying to access some endpoint, private endpoint, we are going to check if the user has recently changed their password or not. So I'll tell you what's its use case, because right now we haven't created this fifth middleware over here, which is called the protect. So inside this protect middleware, we are going to use that method. Okay, let me again check if there are any questions inside the comment section. Okay, so there are no questions, additional questions. So let me just continue with Codebase again. So here we have created the models right now. Okay, so we can now focus inside our auth middleware. Okay, so here right now you can see we have got our register endpoint, send OTP, verify OTP, and login. But here we are missing something, and that is our resend OTP. Because when we send the OTP and the user is trying to create a new account, let's say they don't get the OTP at the first time, okay, or that OTP expires. So we need to send another OTP. So we should have an endpoint for that. Okay, let's create that. Okay, so here I'm just going to write after send OTP. Let me create the resend OTP. Now, what do we need in order to resend the OTP? We just need the user's email. Okay. So here I'm just going to write exports dot resend OTP. This is just going to be a simple function. And since it's going to have some asynchronous operation inside it, because we are going to read and write from database, or we are going to delete from database. So whenever we do something which is asynchronous in nature, we have to in order to catch that error, we have created this higher order function catch async. So it's going to take a function inside it, asynchronous function, and that function is going to get these three things: request, response, and next as the argument. Okay, now over here, first of all, we are going to get the email from the request body. So as I told you, we just want to know the email, and that will be provided to us through this request body. Okay. So here I'm just going to write const user equals. Okay. Now since we have the email of the user, so we can just write a database query over here and get the user document. So I'm just going to write await and then the user model. You can see this is user model. We are referencing to it. Okay, at the top you can see user refers to model slash user. So let me just execute this method called find one. Now if you are wondering from where do I know that I have to call this particular method on it, because this is given inside the documentation. So let me just show it to you. If you visit the documentation over here, mongoose find method. Okay, so just search for it and you will get this link, mongoose.com slash docs queries.html. So on this page you can see that there are lots of methods, and what I'm using right now is this find one method. Okay, so you have to know these methods in advance, because this is part of MongoDB. So if you don't know it already, just follow what I'm saying you. Okay, and you can also learn MongoDB in detail after this course. So over here inside this find one, we need to basically provide a field through which we want to find and the value. So the field will be email and the value will also be email. Since we are, using modern JavaScript, so we can just also write the shorthand syntax, which is this one. Okay. So this also means the longhand format, which is email colon email. Okay. So now here there are two possibilities. The first one is this user document will be undefined. That means we don't have any user record with that given email. And the second one is we find a user record. So what we're going to do over here, if we don't find a user record, so I'm just going to write if not user record, then we want to return a response from here. And the response will be an error response. So here I'm just going to send the 400 status code, and the body that I'm going to share, basically send from here, it will be a JSON, it will be in JSON format. The status will be set to error, and the message is going to be email is invalid. Okay, because that is the only logical reason why we are not getting any user. So if if the user passes us an email from the front end, which is, an invalid email or an email which is not present inside our database, so we are going to return this error. Now let's come to the next possibility, which is we find this user. So in that case, we need to first of all generate the OTPs. You can see inside this send OTP, we have this function, to create the new OTP. So I'm just going to copy this one. Okay, let's copy it from here, and I'm going to paste it inside this one. So generate new OTP. First of all, we need to generate the OTP. So we are using this package OTP generator. We are passing the configuration, and as a result, we are getting the OTP. Now, after creating the OTP, we also need to decide the OTP expiry time, because remember, we have this field inside our user data, user record. So here I'm just going to also define this field called OTP expiry time. And this is going to be equal to date.now, which means the current time plus 10 minutes. Now here this is minutes. We are then multiplying it by seconds, and each second has 1000 milliseconds. So we are also multiplying it by 1000. So actually this is going to be the time in millisecond at which the OTP is going to expire. Okay. I hope that is clear. Now, since we already have the user document, so I can just simply write user dot and then the field name, which is OTP expiry time, and I can just set its value equal to OTP expiry time. Okay, so here I'm just going to write OTP expiry time. Similarly, I'm also going to set the OTP. So let's write user dot OTP equals new OTP. Okay. So inside the user document, this field OTP, you can see it's going to contain the newly generated OTP. Now, just assigning the values is not enough. We also need to save these changes. So here we need to write await, and then on this user document, we need to execute this save function. So here I'm just going to write save, and I'm writing this curly bracket because inside it you can, pass some options like new, true, validate, modified only. There are lots of options available, but in this particular case, we don't need to pass anything. We can just leave it, empty curly bracket. Then after saving this OTP and the expiry time in the user's record, the next thing is to send the mail to the user. So here I'm just going to write to do, because right now we don't have the mail service. So here I'm just going to write send OTP via mail. Okay. So after the mail is sent, okay, we are going to send a response back to the user. So let's write response dot status. Here I'm going to send the status code of 200 because everything went well. Okay, and the JSON body, inside this we are going to just send a status, which will be our success message, and along with it we are also going to send a message. Now this message is going to be OTP sent successfully. You can just write a message according to your choice over here. Okay, I'm just writing what I think is reasonable. Okay, so this is our recent OTP endpoint, actually the middleware. We are going to also use it inside our routes, then only it will be accessible. Then after that, we have our verify OTP and the login. Okay. We also need to create the protect endpoint, because whenever we try to access any private endpoint, we are going to pass it through a middleware, which is going to check if the token is valid. Now, what is this token? What I'm talking about is whenever we are logging in, you can see when we log into our application, at the end, I'm sending a token back to the user. Okay. After signing it using JWT. This is our JWT.sign function. So this JWT is going to be returned to us with every request. Okay. So whenever user tries to access some private endpoint, which is, authenticated, so we are going to receive that token. Now we need to verify each time if the token is valid or not. So we are going to create a function. I'm going to call this function protect. Why it is called protect? It's just my personal choice. Okay. So here I'm just going to write exports dot protect. Okay. This name actually sounds better to me because it basically tells us what it's going to do. It's going to protect the other middlewares, okay, from being accessed without authentication. So over here, let me just write catch async. This is going to be our function, okay, higher order function that we have already created in order to catch the errors inside our asynchronous function. So inside utilities, you can go to this file called catch async, and you can find this function. Okay, we have already created it. Now inside this catch async, we need to pass an asynchronous function. And this asynchronous function is going to get three arguments: request, response, and next. Now, in the body of this function, we can just write the logic. And that logic is, first of all, I want to add the try and catch block because I, whenever, let's say, we get into an error, I want to handle it gracefully. So inside this catch block, what I'm going to do, first of all, let's log the console to the error. So log the error to the console. Okay. Sorry for the tongue slip. Okay. I basically said something wrong. And over here, after that, I want to basically log something else inside the console. So I'm just going to write this is our protect endpoint. So whenever we reach this point, this means our protect endpoint is failing. Okay, that means authentication is failing. So I just want to be aware about that. So when we run this application, we can see this particular message appearing inside the terminal. Okay, if we get into an error. So this is how we need to debug our application. Okay, we just add console logs and check from at which point of the flow of the application is terminating, or what is the error, which field is wrong. So we need to basically make use of console log. It's a very good technique to debug the application. So I prefer to write console logs frequently wherever I think it will be suitable. So after that, since we are going to, return a response back to the user and the authentication has failed in this case because we are inside the catch block. So I'm just going to return this 400 status code, and the body of the response, it's going to contain two things again: status, which will be set to error, and the message, which is going to tell authentication failed. So this is the actual, message that the user is going to see on their screen, and we are defining that message inside our backend. Now let's talk about the try block. So inside the try block, what is going to happen? First step is to get the token extracted. So the number one priority right now is getting token. Now from where we are going to get this token? So let me tell you that when we make a request, we are going to pass headers with each request. Okay. So these headers are some key pair values. You can think about it like that. So there will be one header called authorization, and we are going to check if it contains a bearer token or not. Let me tell you how we are going to do that. And if you don't know how to pass headers or how to set headers in the request, don't worry about that. When we start integrating Redux inside our client side, we are going to see that how that is done. So here let me write let token. Okay. So first of all, I am just defining a variable for the token. Then after that, I'm going to write the condition over here. So what is the condition? First of all, I want to get the request. Now inside request, we have headers. Okay. And the header that I am interested in is called authorization. Okay. Now here, please note that you cannot make any spelling mistake. If you do, you are not going to get token. Okay. So please make sure that this authorization is as it is. Okay. Because this is the field that we are going to get inside our header. Then the next condition I want to check over here is after I have confirmed that, okay, we have this authorization field inside our headers. Next thing is I want to check if this starts with bearer or not, because this is going to be a string. So I can just simply write this starts with, okay. And inside this, I want to just pass bearer, okay, because whenever we pass this authentication token, we are going to add this bearer string in front of it. So I'm just going to basically confirm. After that, we have something inside the authorization field, if it's a bearer token or not. That is what we are checking over here. After this is checked successfully and it turns out to be true, so we are going to set the value of token. Now the token value will be request headers dot authorization, and from here we need to basically remove bearer from the start. Okay, so here I'm just going to write this method on the string, which is split method. So first of all, we are going to split the string with spaces. So whenever there is a space, the string is going to be splitted. And after that, there will be two elements inside the array, which is first one is bearer and the second one will be the token. Since the token is the second element, which means the index will be 1. So I want to access the first index. Okay, like this. Now there is another case in which we are not passing the token inside the header. Okay, so what is going to happen in the other case? So let me just write over here, else if. Now inside this condition, we can also get the JWT token inside the cookies. So I'm going to write request dot cookies dot JWT. Okay. Now if we get the JWT inside the cookies, we can just simply write token equals request dot cookies dot JWT. Okay. I hope this is clear that there are two ways in which we are going to get the token. The first one is headers and the second is cookies. Okay. Now we are going to now place another condition over here, basically a check. We are going to see if we have got a token after the flow has reached this point. If we have successfully extracted a token, then it's okay. We are going to continue with the flow. We are going to execute something else. But in case, let's say when we don't get a token, that means token is still null. So in that case, what is going to happen? We are going to send an error back to the client. So let's write response.status. And in this case, I'm going to send this status code of 401. 401 means unauthorized. Okay. And then let's write the JSON body that we want to basically send response. Okay. So I just want to send a message back to the user, and this message will be, you are not logged in. You are not logged in. Please log in to access application. Okay, so this is what we are going to tell our user, that since you are not logged in, so you must log in before you try to access our application. Okay, then after this, we are going to do the second step, which is, since we have got the token, if we are on this line, so I'm just going to verify token. So let me write here, in this step we are going to do verification of token. In order to verify the token, I'm going to write await. Okay, so let me also tell you that in order to verify the token, since we are signing it using JWT, so there is another method on JWT which is called verify. We are going to make use of that. Okay, and this is actually going to be asynchronous. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it into a promise. So let's write promisify Promisify, which is actually going to come from utility. It's an inbuilt package inside Node.js. Okay, so I can just write Promisify, and you can see this Promisify is coming from utilities. Okay, util, which is a package. Okay, and we don't need to actually install it from npm because it comes already with the Node.js. Okay, so inside this Promisify, I want to write JWT, and on this JWT we have a method called verify. Okay, now, after calling it or basically promisifying it, I want to pass something inside this verify function. And there will be two things that we need to pass. The first one is the token that we have received, and the second is the token signing key. So here you can see inside our config env, we have created this token key, and this is what we are using in order to sign the key. Inside of controller at the top, you can see we are using process env.token key as a signing key. So I just want to, get this signing key, and I'll provide it to my verify function along with the token. And as a result, it's going to, give me a decoded message. So here I'm just going to write const decoded. Now, what is this decoded going to contain? Let me tell you. When we were creating or signing this JWT, what is the detail that we are passing? Only one thing, which is user ID. Okay. So this object is what we are going to get as a decoded value. Okay. So here this decoded will be equal to an object which contains the user ID. So if you want to see it inside the terminal, you can just simply write console.log and just write decoded. Okay. Then here, let me also write the third step. Now inside the third step, since we now at this point we have the user's ID, so we can just simply, make a query to our database and we can check. So here I'm just going to write check if user is still exists, because there is a possibility that the user was logged into our application, then due to some reason this user was deleted, let's say from the database or from some other application like some admin panel or something else. So in that case, in order to prevent the error, I just want to check if this user is still present inside our database or not, because this is a practical situation. So here I'm going to write const this underscore user, and in order to get the user document we need to make a query to the user model. So let me write user dot, and in this case there is this method called find by id because we have the id of user. So inside this I can just pass decoded, and which contains this property user id, so we can just simply write decoded dot user id. Now here, based on the value of this user, we are going to send some response back to the user. So here I just want to check if not this user, which means we didn't find any user document with this decoded id. So in that case, user is deleted. So here I'm just going to return a response back to the user. So let me write return, and this will be equal to response dot status, and the status code will be 401, which means unauthorized. Okay. Inside the JSON response, I'm just going to send a message back to the user, which is going to tell the user belonging to the token, the user belonging to this token does no longer exist. Okay, so this is what we are going to display on our UI as an error message. I hope this is clear. Okay, then there is a fourth step after this one. Okay, and that fourth step is going to be after the user after the user has made this particular request, if the password was changed from some other application. Let me give you a real practical example. So let's say you have an Amazon account. Okay, and two people are using that account at the same time from different devices, and one user changes the password from the other one, and you are still using that same profile on the other device. So what is going to happen, as soon as the password is changed, you are going to get logged in, and then Amazon is going to ask you to log in again with the new password. So that is why, in order to prevent this case, or basically to safeguard against this possibility, we are going to check this fourth condition, which is if the user recently changed their password. Okay, so here what I'm going to do on this fourth step, I'm going to check if user changed password after the token was issued. Now let me tell you how we are going to know when the token was issued. So that means we need to get some time, okay, at which the token was signed using this function. But you can see we are not using any timestamp while signing. So how we are going to get that timestamp? Okay, let's answer this question. First of all, go to your browser, and when you are on your browser, just search for jwt.io. This is the website for JSON Web Token. Okay. Now just scroll down a little bit and you'll see this debugger over here. The algorithm is set to HS256. Leave it like that. Okay. Now here is an example encoded JWT string, and you can see it has these three things: header, payload, and here is verify signature. So inside the header, you see the algorithm that is used and the type, which is JWT string. Then inside payload, we have a field called IAT. This IAT means issued at. Okay, and this is what we need right now. This issued at is a number in milliseconds, which is going to represent when this token was signed. Okay, so you can see right now inside our user.js model, we have a field called password changed at, and inside our JWT, we have this inside the decoded string, we are going to have that IAT, which means issued at timestamp. So we are going to compare those two things. Okay. And when we compare these things, we are going to get if the user has changed their password after the token was issued or not. Okay. And based on that, we are going to, allow the user to proceed, or we'll tell them that the password has recently been changed. So please log in again. So in order to do that, we need to create this method inside our user.js schema, which is changed password after. So let's now get back to our user schema. Okay. Please let me know if you have any doubts because this is a live stream right now. So you can just ask me any question, okay, in between. I'm actually checking my, chat section in order to see for any doubts. Okay, so let's get back over here. What I'm going to write, let's refer to user schema first of all. Now on this user schema, I want to create a method. So let's write methods. Okay, not method but methods. Please make sure that you are writing it correctly. Then the name, which is changed password after. Now this name is up to you. Okay, so I'm actually making this name by myself. This is not defined somewhere. Now this is going to be equal to a function, and inside this function I'm going to just pass one thing, which is JWT timestamp. JWT timestamp means that IAT field, okay, when the JWT was signed. So here I'm just going to write JWT timestamp. Then what we're going to do, we can access the current user document using this property. Now on this property, we are going to access password changed at this field. Okay. So password changed at. I'm going to write if this dot password changed at, if we have this, a defined value for this thing, then we are going to execute some logic. Otherwise, we are just going to, return false. False means that password was not recently changed. So let the user proceed to the next step. So inside this if condition, when we have a valid value for the recently, password changed at. So what we're going to do, we're going to write over here const change changed timestamp. Let's write changed timestamp, and this is actually going to be equal to this dot password changed at, and from this timestamp, since it's going to be in milliseconds, so I can just write dot get time. I just want to get the time, and then I'm just going to divide it by 1000, which means I'm just going to basically convert it, okay? And then after that, I also want to, uh, wrap this inside the function parse int, and the log here, I'm just going to pass 10, okay? So let me just write parse int, and you can see how this function is going to, work. It's going to convert a string into a number, okay? So we are using the Redux function over here. After this function is run, we are going to get the changed timestamp. Then what we are going to do, we are going to just compare the two things, change timestamp and this one. So let's write JWT timestamp if it is, less than change timestamp. We just want to confirm this thing, which is uh, when the password was changed, okay, that timestamp was greater or not with the JWT signing time. That is what we are comparing inside this function. So when this is returned, either it will return true or false, a Boolean value. So based on that, over here, we are going to make a decision. So let me write inside our auth controller again. I'm inside auth controller and protect endpoint. Okay. So inside this fourth check, what I'm going to write, I'm going to write if, and from here you can see we have this user, and on this user I want to access the method that we have just defined, which is changed password after. So let me write changed password after. And since you saw that inside this function we need to pass an argument, which is the JWT timestamp, and the JWT timestamp can be accessed using this decoded value. So on this decoded value we are going to have a property called IAT. IAT means issued at time. Okay. Now, if this condition turns out to be true, then we need to return an error. So I'm just going to write return response dot status, and the status code will be 401, which again means unauthorized access. Then inside the JSON response that I'm going to send, let's write a message that will be displayed on the client side. So the message will be user recently changed password. Okay. The user has recently changed their password, so please log in again. This is what we are telling the user. Please log in again. Okay. So I hope you understand how the authentication system really works behind the scenes. Okay. Now, after all the checks have been passed, this is the final step where we are going to grant the access to the authorized routes. Okay. So after so many checks, we are going to, finally get the access to the protected routes, or you can call endpoints. So in order to do that, we are just going to pass some information to the next middleware. So on the request object, I'm going to add another property called user, and let me just pass this user document to the next middleware. So I can just write rec.user equals this underscore user, and after that we just need to call the next function which we get as the argument. Over here you can see this next function, I'm just going to call it, and with this our product endpoint is now completed. Okay, so that means we are ready to actually start calling our API. But before that, let me see, over here we don't have any additional questions, so I'm just going to close this live stream over here, and after a very short break I'm going to come back, and we'll actually, first of all, we are going to verify the logic that we have written till now inside our auth controller, and after we make sure that it's correct, okay, we are going to set up the routing for our authentication. Okay, so we'll see how the routing is also done, and after the routing is done, we are going to next focus on creating the user controller. User controller is also going to have, lots of logic. So please be prepared for that. Okay, it's going to be very exciting. Let's meet in the next one. Okay.